Hello, welcome back. Welcome back to the Educated Franchisee educational series on FDDs. I'm Rick Bizio. I'm the author of The Educated Franchisee. I'm also a franchise coach. I work with individuals who want to become franchisees and to help teach them how to make better, smarter, more educated decisions. And I have on the line with me Nancy Leonard, who is an expert in franchise law. It's Leonard and Associates, been involved in franchise law now for a quarter century, and a real expert. We're lucky to have her. So thank you for being here, Nancy.
Thank you. And I just want to jump back to what we were talking about in the prior session, and that is item 3, the litigation disclosure. Rick, you were right on target. It is 10 years. It did not change. So thank you for that. I double checked it, and it is 10 years. So good job.
I validated my honorary legal degree.
There you go. An honorary legal eagle.
There you go. Exactly. Very good. Super. Well, this is part 3. And in part 3, we're going to start with item 5. And item 5 kind of gets into some of the fees. And so item 5 begins with franchise fees. That's really the title of that. So just give us a highlight as to what are you going to find in there and what should you be looking for?
Okay, I'm going to just say 5, 6, and 7 that we're going to talk about in this part, I think are the 3 most important items in the whole FDD, in my opinion, because they are the financial disclosures. So item 5 is, as you said, the disclosure of the franchise fees, meaning the upfront fees that you're going to pay to the franchisor or their affiliates. It's going to disclose not only the franchise fee itself that you're paying upfront, but anything else that you're required to pay initially. If there's a separate fee for training that you have to pay up front, or any other fees that you have to pay up front to the franchisor or its affiliates, not to third parties, but to them, it will be disclosed in item 5. And it's very important in those 3 items, 5, 6, and 7, if you don't do it anywhere else, in those 3 to read the footnotes. So the footnotes in item 5 are very, very important to read through, because they're going to be more in depth as to what's and explaining what are those upfront fees, where are they going, what are they used for, and so forth.
Gotcha. So when you look at item 5, it says franchise fee, and item 6, it says other fees. So what is the difference? Where does that divider go between franchise fees and other fees?
Yeah, so 5 is intended to be the upfront fees that you're paying right off the bat. You sign the agreement, you're paying these fees. Item 6 are the ongoing fees. So they are royalties, marketing fund fees or advertising fund fees. They are maybe a software license fee. Maybe there's a fee for the point of service system that you're using, point of sale system that you're using. You know, whatever the ongoing fees, and most franchise systems have a complete list of those. And in fact, referring back to my little binder here, I have
Bible.
I have, it's done with, let me go to item 6. There's usually a full list of what can be included and what can't be included in there. And it has to be the amount of the fees, who they're payable to. In this case, they're only payable to the franchisor or its affiliates. So again, it's those ongoing fees that you're paying to them. It's not the fees you're going to pay to anybody else, like a landlord to lease the property, or for working capital, or any of those others. That's going to be in the next item we're going to talk about. But in item 6, it's going to be the fees you pay the franchisor or its affiliates on an ongoing basis.
When you look at these fees, there are a whole variety of different types of fees.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, obviously the fees have to not be so large that you can't make money, right? It has to financially work. Otherwise, you shouldn't do the business. You have to, I think as a prospective franchisee, you have to be able to build your P&Ls and actually understand financially, fiscally, that it's a viable business concern. With that being put aside, are there legal things that we need to look for in items 5 and 6?
Well, you need to see that, as I said, they're the financial disclosures. So honestly, they're more a numbers person, an accountant, or your business planner, or somebody who can do a pro forma, somebody who can run, same thing with item 7, someone who can run and take these numbers and understand and run with them and make a pro forma, so that you have an idea of going forward, can I make money off of this business? But the real answer to that question is talk to franchisees in the system and find out what their experiences are. Because again, nobody's audited these numbers. nobody's really looked at them and verified them. So you're relying on the franchisor, and hopefully the numbers are accurate. As far as what you're paying in 5 and 6, they should be, because they're going to the franchisor. But 7, maybe not. We're going to talk about 7 in a minute, but they're all connected. These 3 items are very connected in my mind. And so with items 5, 6, and 7, you should be able to have a business plan. You should be able to have a pro forma that an accountant or a financial planner can help you work through. And as I said, 5, 6, and 6, you're paying these fees to the franchisor or one of their affiliates. So you should be able to figure those out, and they should be pretty accurate since it's from the franchisor.
And it's outlined in the franchise agreement as well. So it should cross-reference pretty well as to what those fees are.
One would hope, but not always.
They should. That's right, it should.
It should.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as I recall with item 6, some of the fees that are outlined aren't always necessarily charged. Meaning there might be a fee that could prospectively be charged to something like a local area marketing fee that they don't currently do, but might at some point in the future, correct?
Well, so a brand new system might even have a national marketing fund. They may have national, regional, and local, and not. They have the right to charge for those down the road, but they aren't charging for them initially. So if you're, in a brand new system and they're just getting started, they probably aren't going to charge for any of those, but they do have the right. And a year, 2 years, 3 years into the franchise, they have the right to start charging that. And all of a sudden you haven't been paying it. It's going to be a little bit shocking, but they've had that right all along. If you go back and look at your franchise agreement or the FDD. Again, the FDD is just a disclosure document. It's just telling you these things. It's informing you of those things. The actual contract is the franchise agreement.
Good. Let's go to item 7.
Yep, item 7.
It's called an estimated initial investment.
Yes, so item 7's fun. And that's the one I wanted to show you the actual chart for that I pulled up in here so that you could see it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it through. Yeah, so here's the item 6 chart, by the way, that I was looking for. I don't know if you can see it, but it's done as a chart, and it's, it's royalties and any advertising, training fees, transfer fees, and those kind of things. Item 7 also is a chart, and that's a chart that talks about what your initial investment is, or as I like to call it, it's the place where you can find out what is it going to cost to open up this business and operate it initially. It's always told in terms of a range. I recommend to every one of my clients, budget on the high end of the range that's stated there. You can't go wrong by being overfunded. You can have really serious issues if you're underfunded. So definitely budget on the high end of the range. I also tell my clients that when you're talking to franchisees around the country and you're making those validation calls that you should be making, ask them, is item 7 accurate? Because I can tell you that I have seen systems in which the item 7 is tremendously understated. Because again, this FDD is used in part to sell franchises, right? I mean, it's provided early in the process, as we discussed earlier, I think in part 1. And so a franchisor wants to put its best foot forward and present all of the numbers in a way that look very appealing to a prospective franchisee. So if item 7, in reality is $500,000, it's showing that that's what the cost is to open up the business. But if that's what they're showing it is, and it costs you $1 million, you haven't budgeted for that. And that can be very, very serious. And I have had systems where actually item 7 was 1/3 of what it ended up costing them, even on the maximum end of it. So that's another thing I think very important to validate. And again, all 3 of these, 5, 6, and 7, read the footnotes to them because there's a lot of information. But the chart includes things such as the initial franchise fee, training expenses, expenses for the physical location, if it's a brick and mortar, whether that's a lease or buying property, all of the build out equipment, inventory to begin, security deposits, legal fees, working capital, all of that has to be in item 7. And I can show you, I think in here, a chart of what it looks like. So it's over 2 pages, but you can kind of see, I think, kind of what it looks like. It's done in form of a chart. At the end of the chart, it will have the high and low, and each of the items that have highs and lows, like the franchise fee is not going to have a high and low. It is what it is. But legal fees might have a high and low, or travel and living expenses to get your training might have a high and low. And I'm suggesting budget on the high, always budget on the high. And whatever is stated there, no matter what it is that you're looking at, budget on the total high, budget on each individual high. I think you can't go wrong in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk to like travel expenses, which is obviously always a very small expense, but you know, I think budgeting on a high is safe, but you also have to try to put some reality in it, right? So let's say you're joining a franchise system and you live in Atlanta and the headquarters is in Atlanta. Well, you don't have airfare and you're not going to be able to sleep at home. So those might be a little bit lower. On the other hand, if you look at item 7 and they have an expense and the expense says it's going to cost $500,000 and you live in New York City, well, it's not going to be $500,000 for you. It's going to be more expensive. So where you live, you know, that's one set of numbers that just aren't going to apply equally to, you know, Omaha, Nebraska, or New York City, or Los Angeles. It's just, you know, it has to be adapted.
But it's supposed to. When you're planning out an FDD as an attorney writing it, you're supposed to, the item 7 is supposed to take into account that somebody who wants to open up a location in Manhattan versus somebody who wants to open up a location in some area that's much less costly. And it's supposed to take that in. That's why there's a range. Whether it's realistic or not for your particular location, you know, who knows? But again, if it's done right, budgeting on the high end always will be at least the amount, you know, will cover all of your expenses, hopefully, to open up.
And I like the idea of talking to franchisees. Franchisees absolutely can give you some. But again, if you're talking to a franchisee who lives in New York and you say, how much did it cost you? And you live in Omaha, you kind of have to wonder, is that going to be relative in my area or not? So
I agree.
Kind of have to filter it and understand it. So in item 7, not all of them are opening expenses, right?
No, they aren't all brand new, you know, opening. They can be usually within the first few months, what it's going to cost. But it does bring in one of the other line items will be the grand opening and the costs for that. The grand opening is part of the advertising that usually is required.
As I recall in the item 7, it must include at least the first 3 months of expenses. So it's the first 3 months of cash flow requirements, the first 3 months of lease, the first 3 months of insurance expenses.
Yeah.
As you go through it. And a lot of people don't realize there is actually a cash flow component in it of the first 3 months. Now, whether it's accurate or not is a different conversation, right? But
Exactly.
it should be there. And there are some franchisors I've seen who have much longer periods. It's a minimum of 3, but I've seen some franchisors include 6 months or even 12 months upon occasion. It's not often, but rare.
Honestly, there isn't an actual requirement that it be 3 months. It's just you have to disclose what it is. So you have to say that whatever it is that your chart is going to encompass, that you identify what that is. So whatever your startup expenses are and whatever you anticipate the period of time after that, as far as the initial investment. So I don't think that 3 months, I think the 3 months used to be in a requirement. I'm not sure that that's still the case any longer. I think that changed, actually. It was 3 months years ago. But I think in 2008, when we had the new rule come in, I think that may have modified to being a little bit more vague, as long as you identify what that post-opening period of time is that you're covering in it. It has to be clearly stated, as everything else is supposed to be in the FDD, but I don't think it's as specific as 3 months anymore.
Gotcha. Excellent. What else do we need to know about items 5, 6, and 7? Those are kind of meat and potatoes, and we wanted to cover those here in part 3.
Really are. I think we did a good job of covering. I just can't emphasize enough. To me, they're the most important items. And read the footnotes as well as the body, and make sure that you budget on the high end of item 7 always.
And the thing I also think to keep in mind in regard to these item numbers is these item numbers are not really so much about legal. They're a lot more about operational, about financial, about being able to understand, giving you a starting point to building a P&L and understanding your expenses. It's not a finish point, it's just a starting point that you can build from. And then you validate, what do they say? Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify, right?
And 100%, because as I said a couple times in our parts that we've done so far of this interview, These aren't necessarily verified in any other capacity. So yes, it's important to verify from other franchisees.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to close it up for part 3. Thank you for being with us on part 3. We're going to close that up. And again, when this closes up, you'll see all of our contact information if you do want to reach out to us. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is that if you are looking for specific FDDs, a website that we have is called fddexchange.com. And there are literally thousands and thousands of FDDs there that you can go and look at on fddexchange.com if you feel like there's an FDD you need to look at. Thank you.
Thanks.